Hey everybody, what's going on? It's James here with Crypto Common Sense, and I have your Bitcoin/cryptocurrency update for Monday, April the 6th. Before I jump into the content for this video, please do me a huge favor, hit the thumbs up button. Don't forget to click that bell icon, and don't forget to leave a comment, even if it's just, hey, I was here. That helps with the YouTube algorithm. So I want to do another free video for you guys today. I did one yesterday, which is what I've been doing, is the weekly video. But I wanted to do a second free video today because obviously Bitcoin has went up a few $100s, and I wanted to kind of give my opinion on what's happening. Also, the video yesterday got really long, so I cut some stuff out that I wanted to talk about. So first things first, guys, obviously if you haven't joined the Patron yet, make sure you do that. It's early in the month, so you can join now. It's just $4.95 a month, and I would love to have you in there. That helps to support the channel. So I do want to talk about Bitcoin today and what's happening, because obviously there was a pump. And I shared this with my Patreon group last night, right? When it broke through, there was a 1 hour resistance that I was watching. It was this downward sloping line, and I had said on both Discord and Patreon that, you know, I didn't trust this line of resistance, right? And that if it pumped above it, that I would start watching for a move up to the 4 hour line of resistance. So here's what happened here, right? You get this downward sloping line, it breaks above it, comes down, retested. That's a bullish retest, okay? And that was right here. And if somebody had longed that, right, boom, 5%. If you didn't long it, cool. It was still a reason not to short it. You go over to the 4 hour chart, you have this upward sloping line. Right about that same time, once it broke the 1 hour, then it was time to watch the 4 hour. And of course, once it broke the 4 hour, it broke through it and closed above it right here. And again, this was shared on Patreon. Boom, 2% pump off of that close, right? Two really simple trades based on simple trend lines. So now what's happening? Well, now, if you look at the daily chart, okay, we have this long sloping yellow line. We don't care about that. We're nowhere near it. We have this sloping green line, looks like a bullish retest here. Fine, that was back on March 29th. But now we also have this green line, which started here, touched here, was bearish resistance here, right? Had a bearish retest before the huge dump. And now we're coming up for another retest of it. So is this bullish or is this bearish? It's neither, okay? What it is a line in the sand. If it breaks north of that line and closes a daily candle above that line, I would think that we are going much higher, right? Toward that $8,000 level, most likely. If it fails to close a daily candle above that line, I would think that we're probably going to move back down. And in yesterday's video, I said I really didn't see the rising wedge people were talking about, but it's really because I was too zoomed in, right? I think I was on a 4 hour chart and I didn't really see a rising wedge there. But if you zoom out and look at a daily chart, I get it. Right, I get what they're saying now. So if you look, you had a touch here, you had a touch here, and you get this upward sloping downward, bottom line. If you look up top, you have, this obvious trend line that's a lot, less steep than this one. They're converging. That's exactly what a rising wedge looks like. And remember, a rising wedge is bearish in nature, but then you add the volume to that sucker, and it really starts to paint a bearish picture because volume is still going down, right? So why is this pumping today? Well, no one knows, right? There's all kinds of theories of why it's pumping. I have my theory, and it's right here. I've been saying now for a couple of weeks, as have many other traders, that Bitcoin is not decoupled from the stock market. It is, in fact, moving with it in almost identical fashion. And look here what we have. This was the Dow Jones future. It started pumping yesterday, right? This was yesterday's open right here, down around 20,944 or 20,945. Boom, now it's way up at 22,000, right? Look at this. We can connect this magnet down here. Here's April 5th. It's up 5.66%. And then you have Bitcoin, which is up 5.85%. They're not just moving together, they're moving together almost exactly together, right? So, I mean, it's really hard to get bullish on Bitcoin and say Bitcoin is going to be the store of value for the future when it's just doing what the stock market is doing, right? Look at the S&P 500 here. Put this on a daily chart, right? Look at this. This isn't futures. This is the actual stock. And if you look where it closed on Friday to where it's at right now, it's up 5.75%, right? Pretty crazy stuff, but it's interesting, right? It is interesting. If we look at the CME chart, if we can break above that line I just talked about on the daily, that daily RSI line, and we start to head north, you know, I was thinking like 8,000 maybe, right? Because that would be the golden pocket of this move. We'll pull this down. I'm going to get volume off there so it's not cluttering things up. Right around 79 to 8,000 right up here. Would also be up around this red trend line, so that makes sense. But you also have to remember there's a gap up here on the CME at 8,480. It's weird how that area was the old gap, right? First it was the gap for bears. Look at this crazy shit. The gap for bears was right here. Everybody, you know, a lot of bulls had said we were never going to fill it. We filled it. And now over here that became a gap for the bulls. So the same people who were saying we're never going to fill that gap are now praying, you know, to God that we're going to fill this gap over here. And, you know, as I've said in the past, gaps are gaps. Whether they're bullish or bearish, they like to fill. So we have to be mindful of that, okay? We also still have this tiny little gap up at 11,795 that's not filled. So these are the only gaps on the daily chart that have not filled yet. It's this gap here and this gap here. So, do they fill? I don't know. I think they do. The one thing that I would mention is I still think that Bitcoin will go back up. I do not think Bitcoin is dead. I do not think Bitcoin is going to zero. Even though I'm bearish, right? I do not think that Bitcoin is going to die. I think that there's still a lot of interest in trading it. So, the reality is this. The one thing about these gaps that I always keep in the back of my mind is, you know, they're a little different from the bear gaps, because the bear gaps, you know, if it starts moving up too much, it's never going to go back down and fill them in. So you always think, okay, it's going to fill them in sooner rather than later, because it can't go much higher without filling them in first, or it shouldn't, right? That's why I was putting so much faith in those gaps, like the gap down around $4,100 on the liquidity gap. The difference is on these bull gaps, right? This can go as low as $1, and I still think eventually it's going to go back up, right? Let me rephrase that. I don't really think it would go back up. If it went to $1, I think that would be the end of Bitcoin. Okay. But what I'm saying is it could go down drastically, maybe down to even $1,000, right? And still eventually go back up and make a new all-time high, which means that when it eventually went back up, it would fill in these gaps on the way. Okay. So I'm a little less, you know, I don't put so much faith in them as I did the bear gaps for that reason. Eventually, they have to get filled if Bitcoin goes to new all-time highs. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, but you know, it is there, and this one is fairly close to where we're at when you really think about it. 8480, we're sitting at 7200, so it is something that I will keep an eye on. I haven't looked at the fibs on the CME. Let's do that real quick. Ooh, wow. See, the golden pocket's in a different place in the CME. If you look at it, it's actually up between 8,200 and 8,410. So that would be painful for bears, right? And when I say painful for bears, I'm talking about people that are in open short positions, okay? I'm not in open short positions. I'm still sticking to my intraday timelines. I still haven't seen anything that makes me think this is getting ready to pivot, okay? And by pivot, I mean switch direction and put in a new low. So... but that's interesting, right? A couple lines to watch. This video is not going to be as long as most of my videos. I just want to do this like little mini update. But, you know, I wouldn't get overly bullish on this pump. Because number one, it is pumping with the stock market. It's not pumping on its own accord. And number two, it's really still inside of that rising wedge with dropping volume. And it's inside of, you know, this, or underside, or under, excuse me, this RSI trend line right here. Okay, so a daily close and break above that, I would expect this to go much, much higher, right? And by much, much higher, I'm talking toward the $8,000 level. just like when it broke this 1 hour trend line, we had this big, 5.5% pump. And just like when it broke this 4 hour trend line and closed above it, it had this nice little 2 to 2.5% pump. Okay. That's what I'm watching. I'm watching for a break of that daily trend line. Okay. And again, remember, as far as stocks go, guys, I posted a chart about this before the dump. This is what kills me, right? When people are like, oh, nobody could see this coming. Some of you are going to remember this chart, right? I posted this back. This was on March 8th. And this was a monthly chart for the S&P 500. S&P 500 was sitting around 2,972. And I said, right, whether you're a bull for Bitcoin or whether you're a bull for the S&P 500, you better hope this breaks back above this line. Because if not, it's in real trouble. That was March 8th. The S&P 500 started its decline. It would have been right here, right? Because this was March 9th when it reopened. So the price was right here. It had closed on this candle. And look what happened. That was it, right? It fell 26% after that because it couldn't break back above that line. And this is the same line, right? You're looking at the same line. It had started to curve up. It failed. And then it dumped and ended up closing way the hell down here, right? So now you have this trend line on the S&P 500 going back to 2009 that's broke through. It's not abnormal to come up and retest that. It also wouldn't be abnormal to come up and retest that. This looks like a dead cat bounce to me, right? And if it's a dead cat bounce on the S&P 500, it could be a dead cat bounce on Bitcoin as well. I saw this article and I found it was interesting because you guys that watch the channel know I've been talking about this 1500 level for a while. And this guy is, I don't know who this guy is, some big famous trader guy, right? And, he's saying the same thing, that it could plunge to 1500 in a worst case scenario, right? Will it? I don't know, right? I have no idea. I just know that it makes sense, right? If you start taking all this stuff off and you start looking at this without the rose-colored goggles, we can draw some fibs from 2009's bottom to 2020's high, and our 61.8 is right down here around 1200-ish, right? That's on a log. If we turn this back into a regular chart, it's down between like 16 and 1700, and really, the support back here is right around this area. Right around that 15 to 1600 area. Okay, this is a monthly chart, so you've got your double top there, and it should, if price gets there, it should in theory act as support. Okay, the one hopeful thing about all this, is maybe this was the support right here. This is the 2015 highs, and maybe this was it, right? Maybe this is all we were doing, was trying to come back down and retest that old high, which we didn't quite get there, right? But maybe that's all we were doing. I don't know. All I know is the stock market, it's not like Bitcoin, right? The difference in the stock market and Bitcoin is with Bitcoin, people are basically just speculating. That's what they're doing. They're speculating that it's going to go up, that it's going to be worth $100,000 someday, yada, 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 right? With the stock market, it's much more influenced by the economy and what's actually happening and whether companies are, succeeding in turning a profit or whether companies are failing to turn a profit. All that kind of stuff impacts it a whole lot more. So if it, let me rephrase that. We all thought it impacted it more. But so far, Bitcoin is following the stock market. But what I'm saying is, if the stock market, if things get bad with the economy, right, and the stock market goes lower, I would expect it to pull Bitcoin down with it. But if we are really turning the corner with this COVID-19, right, and if we've seen, the peak, so to speak, and it's going to start to decline over the next couple of months, then that could be very bullish for the stock market. And if it's bullish for the stock market, it's probably going to be bullish for Bitcoin as well. You throw on the halving on top of that, and maybe the bottom is in on Bitcoin. I don't think so. Okay, I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth. So if somebody comes back later, I won't be using this video saying, well, I said that the bottom might be in. No, I don't think the bottom is in. So at the bottom is in, I'm wrong. Okay, let's just be very, very black and white about that. I'm wrong if the bottom is in because I don't think it is. All right, so I'm not trying to give myself a way out. But what I am saying is I could be wrong, right? We don't know, right? This could be the bottom back here. It did fill in the gap, which was the main requirement that I was looking for. Okay, I think it just depends on what the stock market does. I really think that that's what we're looking at right now. But if it breaks south of this wedge, if this does end up being a rising wedge, it's got about a $3,100 breakdown target. So let's just say, hypothetically, it breaks out somewhere around here, right? Put it down around 37, 3,800, basically the beginning of the wedge, okay? And then I think we would go lower, right? I think we would go back and test the 2018 bottom. So, but as far as this pump goes, business as usual, guys, right? It broke trend lines. It acted like it should act when it breaks the trend line, all that kind of stuff. This is the moving averages in the 4-hour chart. It is interesting that they're trying to have a golden cross, right? A true golden cross, moving averages, not EMAs, right? You got your 50 sitting at 6,600 and your 200 sitting at 6,700. So they're trying like hell to get their golden cross on the 4-hour. On the daily, of course, we're, nowhere near that, right? We have the death cross and our 50 is moving ever so slightly down toward the top of this rising wedge or whatever you want to call that. All this stuff being said, guys, please remember, I am some guy sitting in a spare bedroom. So nothing in this video is financial advice. Nothing in this video is trade advice. You should always do your own due diligence and seek out professional investment advice before making any type of investment in cryptocurrency. If you haven't already, check the description. You can find links down there to join my trading course as well as my Patron, which of course is less than $5 a month. You get more frequent updates, more frequent chart posts, and more frequent videos. All right, this is James with Crypto Common Sense reminding you to please trade safe.